We don't win down here. We lose. You ready for that? Oh, you were a post-millennialist. You thought we were just going to go waltzing into the kingdom as you took over the world.
Welcome to Nobody with a Bible. I'm Chief Nobody Brandon. And here we talk about all the things and use biblical discernment while doing so. So let's dig in, not using your feelings, but God's truth.
What's wrong with you people? I'm serious. I mean, this is what's wrong with the Christian church today. We don't know who God is, and we don't know who we are.
My food for Christian thought today. We're dealing with Christians and caffeine. Yeah, Heidi, this is a surprise. Heidi's here with me, but she doesn't know what we're doing today.
No, I was just told to be down here. It is that time, and here I am.
Well, I wanted to dedicate a podcast to this and just do it myself, but then I was like, you know what, this is going to end up just being a hit podcast, and I don't want people to...
Well, because people get defensive, right? So
Right.
if you're talking about something and you just come in, and then people are like, oh, so are you just saying this? So you're not trying to argue. You're just saying, hey, let's, like you said, food for thought. Let's think this through, right?
Yeah, and I mean, this is something that you and I have talked about quite a bit. We agree on.
We do, yeah,
But
absolutely.
in this conversation, I want you to do something that you're professional at and disagree with me and play devil's advocate over here and just try to throw whatever that you think that is going to be thrown our way here. I want you to throw it at me.
Okay, but to keep my biblical womanhood series backed up here, can we just confirm that you say I'm a professional at this, not because I disagree with everything you say, but because we do these types of things often, where again, to help you think through something, I will sit here and kind of play
devil's advocate over here, like you're arguing, but you're not.
Yeah, so when we say we like, oh my gosh, we talked about how we debated the topic of marriage in heaven for hours upon hours the other day. It's not that I disagree with you. I just debate from all the possible angles I can think of. So we were, again, looking at something from all sides and discussing it, not just, talking about one thing. So it's not that I am just a disobedient, disagreeable wife, and that's why I'm a professional here.
Okay, so we all know that. So Heidi said that.
Can we just clear my conscience? Thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay.
Now we're good.
So now I'm ready to disagree. Let's go.
All right. In front of me here, and like I said, I know this is going to be difficult for you, but, and I guess before we start, listen, everybody, I am not saying don't drink coffee or don't drink soda. That is not what I'm saying.
Okay, I will say that. Well, it's soda anyways.
Yeah, don't drink soda. It's bad for you.
It's bad for you.
But I'm not saying coffee drinkers that are that got their knives out, and that's kind of the point of this podcast, but coffee drinkers that have their knife out at my throat, calm down. I'm not telling you to put away your Starbucks or put down your coffee. That's not what I'm doing here. But continuing on, I have the Alcohol and Drug Foundation pulled up in front of me here, an article from them on caffeine. Of course, they have information on every single drug. It's the Alcohol and Drug Foundation. Okay, so you can search for drugs, any drug, and just type it right in. So a conversation that Heidi and I have had before is, I'm not going to get into the alcohol or cannabis discussion today. I mean, that's not what I want to get at, but we see Christians saying a lot of things against both alcohol and cannabis. And these things that they're saying would apply to caffeine. But caffeine is widely accepted, and no Christian has an issue with this. Now, I know there were some old school denominations and definitely some groups throughout history, and there still are some that will not touch, or they attempt not to touch caffeine. So I do know that's not something new. And again, I'm not being legalistic here. I'm like, let's just talk with facts. We as Christians need to be consistent. And if we're going to be consistent about, what we're saying against one thing, but yet what we have accepted for ourselves, I mean, that's inconsistent. We have to kind of stay consistent throughout this whole thing. So on the page here,
well, hold on, and let's add to consistency, because look at the issue we have when Christians are so outspoken and so over the top against homosexuality, but yet not as strict and intense when it comes to
any kind of other sexual immorality.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. No, they're okay with watching Naked and Afraid, but yet we're going to go ahead and condemn homosexuals.
Yes.
So, or whatever the kids watch these days with naked women on it. I don't know.
Consistency is key here, though, because God's word is either consistent or it isn't. It's one or the other, right? Like, what is it?
Right.
And that should be reflect in our lives.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, that's what I'm saying. We shouldn't touch any of that, period. That's my point to that. So I don't want anybody to misunderstand what I just said. But back to caffeine. Literally, the question here is what is caffeine? Caffeine is a stimulant drug, which means it speeds up the messages traveling between the brain and the body. It is found in the seeds, nuts, and leaves of a number of different plants, including, and it goes through all the plants where we can get it from. Okay, in the same category, you ready for this? Listen, other types of stimulants in the same category: amphetamines, cocaine, nicotine, things like this.
That's insane.
Crazy, right? But one thing that I forgot to mention at the beginning real quick is that this study is done from Australia and New Zealand on caffeine. Of course, this does not come from the United States.
The United States admitting these things. I mean, you can find it in some studies,
but
yeah.
this one is from Australia.
There's most other governments that I trust above our own, though. So, not that I trust any of them, but yeah.
Yeah. So, listen, the effects. It's got listed here. The effects of caffeine. There is no safe level of drug use, they note. Use of any drug always carries some risk. It is important to be careful when taking any type of drug. Caffeine affects everyone differently based on size, weight, health, whether the person is used to taking it, whether the other drugs are taken around the same time, or the amount taken. The following effects may be experienced within 30 minutes after consuming caffeine and may continue for up to 6 hours. Okay, so here, these are the effects. This is something that literally affects your behavior. You feel more alert and active. Restlessness, excitability and dizziness, anxiety and irritability, dehydration, higher body temperature, faster breathing and heart rate, headache and lack of concentration, and stomach pains. These things are all on the same list as of any other drug that you take. It literally talks about an overdose of caffeine. It says here, if a large amount of caffeine is consumed, it can cause an overdose. Tremors, nausea and vomiting, abdominal pain, diarrhea, rapid breathing, nervousness, anxiety, irritability, agitation, very fast and irregular heart rate, confusion and panic attack, and seizures. And I personally have witnessed somebody have near seizures from, this was in high school at a dance, and one of the kids, just trying to be funny, of course, did like 10 shots of espresso, like these large shots of just straight espresso, and just one right after the other. And this was a small kid, and he got, it wasn't a pretty sight.
My brother did have a seizure.
You're
and
right.
Fell to the ground.
I don't even know why I forgot about that.
Yeah, he.
That was exhaustion and caffeine.
Caffeine.
Yeah.
But it was the caffeine that did it. Because,
I don't know why I just forgot about that.
Yeah. And the way that he fell off a ladder when it happened. You know what I mean? Like, it could have been, literally, caffeine could have been fatal.
And it's not just that. Listen to the long-term effects. Regular, heavy use of caffeine, such as more than 4 cups of coffee a day, may eventually cause anxiety, difficulty sleeping, ulcers, osteoporosis in postmenopausal women, irritability and headaches, dizziness and ringing in the ears, muscle tremors, weakness and fatigue, rapid heart rate and quickened breathing rate, poor appetite, nausea, vomiting and diarrhea, increased thirst, frequent urination, and increased urine volume, irregular heart rate or rhythm, low blood pressure with faintness or falls, seizures, confusion, or delirium.
Which is crazy, because I would say that most average people, honestly, not even Americans, end up with more, you know what I mean? Like, end up with more caffeine in them than absolutely 4 cups of coffee per day.
Sure.
Every single day. And those are some of the greatest problems we have. I Googled it just to see, but a cup of brewed coffee contains approximately 95 to 165 milligrams of caffeine. And then 1 8-ounce cup of any black cola soda has approximately 24 to 46 milligrams of caffeine. So again,
Jeez.
just to compromise there, or to show the comparison there.
Look at using caffeine with other drugs. The effects of taking caffeine with other drugs, including over-the-counter or prescribed medications, can be unpredictable and dangerous and could cause, and they have listed caffeine and alcohol, strain on the body, and can mask alcohol sedative effects such as falling asleep, leading to drinking more, risk-taking behavior, and increased alcohol-related harms. Caffeine plus other psychoactive drugs. Caffeine may increase the effects of other psychoactive drugs. It has also the potential to interact with the over-the-counter and prescribed medications. Your body goes through withdrawals like a crackhead. Giving up caffeine after using it for so long is challenging because the body has to get used to functioning without it. Withdrawal symptoms usually start within 12 to 24 hours after the last dose. This sounds like heroin. The symptoms can last for around 2 to 7 days or even longer for people who consume a lot. These symptoms can include, and they go on and list all of the symptoms. And in the drug wheel, okay, this is what's really important. We can explore the stimulants on the drug wheel here. It's listed as a stimulant. It's officially listed as a stimulant. And these are the effects: euphoria, increased confidence, rapid heartbeat, confidence, reduced appetite, sexual arousal, mood swings, anxiety, and dehydration. And it's in the same category as nicotine and cocaine and amphetamines. So, all of this information to say, stay consistent, Christians. Because caffeine is absolutely a drug. And I believe that Romans 14, I believe there's plenty of scriptures that give us plenty of reasons that we can drink caffeine and enjoy coffee. I think, why do you think coffee tastes good? The Lord made it. It comes from Him. Okay, so I'm not calling it bad, but you have to kind of call a spade and say it's a drug. And here's the other side of that. It has become an idol in Christianity. It has become an idol. It's amazing. What is the difference, coffee drinker? Tell me this. And this is, Heidi, this is the part of the conversation that you and I have had. What's the difference between a alcoholic in the morning saying he can't get going without a beer in the morning compared to a coffee drinker that says, don't talk to me until I've had my coffee. I just can't get going until I've had my coffee. What's the difference? What, because it's more psychoactive? Alcohol is psychoactive, more psychoactive, I agree. But if you're dealing with a drunk, they're professional. And so one beer, they're not going to act any kind of crazy. It's not going to really change very much. It's just going to get them going, kind of like coffee would be for you. What's the difference?
So I thought your point was for me to try to like play devil's advocate on these things, but it's just really, really hard to do, especially when it comes to this topic, man. Okay.
I didn't set you up. I want you to argue this.
Okay, so on one point, though, we look at with anything, right? I'm not talking about chemically created pharmaceuticals. I'm talking
Correct.
about God's given creation. Caffeine is found in multiple different things, right? And it can be used for good, right? We have a very close friend who has a medical condition. And
yeah, she's literally prescribed it.
She's literally prescribed caffeine in pill form. She has to drink coffee all throughout the day. Right? She has to do certain things because her body literally needs it.
And it's listed on her bottle and her bottle of caffeine pills. It's listed as a Schedule 1 drug.
Yeah, it's very heavy duty, crazy expensive, yada, 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 and it's caffeine. That's what it is.
Yep.
And it's crazy, right? So, but can you see, though, where we can, which I believe any God-given plant, right, anything that
Sure.
the land produces, God gives us to be used for certain things. So do I believe that caffeine can be used in a God-given medical way? Absolutely. Do I believe that cannabis can be used in a God-given natural? Absolutely. Do I believe that alcohol can be used? Right? Yes,
Sure.
all of those things can be used in a certain right. So if you use caffeine, we're not saying that therefore you're sinful because it's all sinful and it's all bad. That's not the point. It can be used correctly. Idolatry is, we always have to look at the heart of the reason, right? So like our friend who has to drink pots of coffee all day long and take these crazy Schedule 1 pills, does she have a problem with idolatry? No, that's literally what she has to do to keep alive, like keep alert, keep going, right? It's idolatry. You have to look at the heart. You have to look at the root. So when we look at these things, this culture, look at, like you said, within the churches. In most church now, you are not even a church worth spending time at if you don't have a coffee shop.
No, and most do. I mean, most churches do. If I know the one that we went to in Charlotte in the past and stuff, they had one. There was a few of them that did. Why?
Yeah.
Did I get too loud?
Yeah, you got really excited there for a second.
Sorry.
I think you just leaned forward. That's okay. No, but it is. And even if
Sorry,
you don't
everybody.
but even if you don't have a coffee shop, right? You have a coffee pot that's at somewhere so people can get a cup of coffee when they come into church in the morning, right? Like, you got to get your, that's always the biggest
But look
line.
at the marketing around
Well,
it.
and there's always the biggest line. You got to hurry and get your cup of coffee before you head into service, right? Like, it's such a big deal. And I just think that's interesting, right? So I'm going to be really bad at trying to play devil's advocate with you, because my question is to everybody else is, so if you walked into church and you saw a coffee pot and everybody lining up to get coffee before they headed into service, you'd think, normal. They're getting some coffee, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody would think much of it. That's a very normal thing to see. If not a full-fledged coffee shop, Starbucks Light sitting out there.
Yeah, versus a glass of wine.
Well,
over here.
like imagine if you had a spot of like, hey, come get your cannabis-infused brownie before you walked into service this morning. You'd be like, what kind of church? Clutch your pearls. What kind of church did you just walk into? What the heck is going on? This is insane, right? Who would do this? And the point is how, and not that we need either to be walking into a church service. Number one is our point, but looking at that, we look at that and we go, oh my gosh, that's so, whatever. We actually just had this conversation with our church members this past weekend. I was talking about it, and I said, if you guys walked into our home and you saw coffee decor like all over my kitchen, you'd be like, oh, okay, she likes coffee, right? It's nothing different. But if you walked in and I had...
Well, now that you have those beer signs or anything like that,
Yeah.
you'd have, like you said, you'd have clutch your pearls moment.
Exactly. You would have that. If I had, like pot paraphernalia laying everywhere, you'd be like, oh my gosh,
Right,
what's
and
going
that's
on in
like
here?
a lot of with the hemp products and stuff now that's
Yeah,
out.
exactly.
A lot of that stuff is so taboo still to people.
is, yeah.
You have the lotion. We have a lotion bottle in our, well, we did. I think it's out now, but we had a lotion bottle in our bathroom. It's got a big old pot leaf on it.
It's a great lotion. It's a
but
hemp
it's a
lotion.
hemp. It's a hemp lotion.
Yeah.
And so
I use lots of hemp products,
but that's
right?
why it's in our bathroom, is we wouldn't have it out publicly because people look at that and they go, oh, but you wouldn't think twice about looking at, like you said, any kind of coffee.
Well, but look at the difference. So if I say, hey, I've got to have a cup of coffee in the morning before I get up and get going. Okay, sure. Who doesn't? Gosh, some people drink 2, 3, 4, 5 cups of coffee in the morning to get up and get going, right? And we're okay with that issue of ain't nobody bother me until I've had my coffee, right? We're okay with that. But if I say, hey, after a long day, I like to sit down and have a glass of wine, we're starting to get more like, oh, you're drinking? Do you have to have that wine, right? Or people, they go overboard about it and they idolize the drinking of wine. Or if somebody were to say, hey, I'm going to, smoke a little something green before I go to bed tonight. Oh my gosh, what are you doing? That's sinful. Like, how dare you? Absolutely not, right? We go the other way with it. And it's like, well, then what's the difference? And I know the biggest thing we say is, and again, a lot of this just comes from ignorance, is people say, well, caffeine and something like alcohol or marijuana are absolutely different, because as soon as you're drinking alcohol, you're becoming drunk, and that's sinful, which, yes, drunkenness is sinful. Or they say with cannabis, then, it's like controlling your mind. You're no longer in control of your own self. It's psychoactive, and you're not being sober-minded, right? Wouldn't those be like the normal things you hear when you bring that up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, you would. And
it's just not accurate.
Yeah.
And again, they go, well, it changes, and I think that's a big part. Well, if it changes your mindset, therefore you're no longer being sober-minded, so therefore it's sinful. Okay, well, you just read what caffeine does. How is that any different?
Right. Exactly. You can go and do a Google search. Just type in, is caffeine a drug?
And it literally fires the same receptors in your brain as cocaine.
Yeah, it enhances dopamine in your brain, and it increases it. And once you're dealing with stuff like that, you're making the same argument that you are with anything else. Now, like I said, I didn't really want to get into the alcohol or cannabis argument.
I know you said that earlier, and I was like, I don't know how we're gonna.
Well, I know, but just because we have to say that, we are not advocating either alcohol or cannabis. That's not, or coffee for that matter. We're not advocating any of that. We're just saying be consistent. And I don't want people to think that, okay, well, so you're saying that you're trying to excuse alcohol and cannabis and trying to compare them with coffee. And that's not what we're trying to do here. I'm trying to say that we have to be consistent across the board. Do I think that caffeine and coffee are wildly different? Caffeine and alcohol are wildly different drugs? Of course I do.
Absolutely.
Of course I do. Are you kidding me? You're talking to a former professional drinker. And are you kidding me? Yes, absolutely.
You're also a former addict of Red Bull, so
and caffeine too.
How that's changed your body.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just got to the point where now I can. Do I still drink a soda every now and then? I'll drink those little 100-calorie tiny little ones. I'll drink like half of those, then I'll give the rest away to Travis. But so that's fine, whatever. But like I said, I'm trying to stay consistent with this argument and present this case as saying, look, this is a drug, and this also has become an idol. And as I said, it's just it's been an accepted idol. As we put this in everything. We say, like as I said in the beginning, not until I've had my coffee. I went into Walmart the other day and walking by the women's clothes, there's a big old moo-moo with a grandma, all like her hair's all messed up, and she's got the coffee pot, and she don't even think about it, and I'm like, and that, it just got me thinking, and I'm like, why is that okay, but everything else is not? And here are the objections that I got from it, since you're not doing me any good here, Heidi.
Well, I had one that I thought of off the top of my head.
Which one?
Legality.
Yes, absolutely. That is, but I agree with that, and I can't really.
But now that's not actually the case in most places.
Yeah, in most places it's not.
So even arguing legality is becoming a lesser and lesser thing.
It is. Just above us, we're in North Carolina. Just above us in Virginia, they have done, and all around us they are. So this conversation is going to start becoming more and more prevalent among Christian circles, and we've seen. Both of these arguments, I really hate dealing with them. I think they're just ridiculously stupid. I think they both fall under Romans 14 in certain moderation, and definitely not recreationally. As you said, I think the only time that you would, honestly, the only time that you would need to drink would be, or not need to drink, you don't ever need to drink. But I think the only time that would be sort of, acceptable, because we know as Christians that we are absolutely commanded not to be drunkards. We are commanded not to be drunk. We see all throughout the Bible biblical examples of what happens when you get drunk. And it's never usually good. Look what happened to Noah. Look what happened to Lot. Usually there's some messed up stuff that comes from it. So we know that we should not drink in excess, but we clearly see that there's some things. So if you're drinking a glass of wine, before you go to bed, if that's how you relax, or if you enjoy a glass of wine at dinner, or if you do, and I know so many Southern Baptists are going to clutch their pearls with this statement, but if you do enjoy a beer with dinner here and there, yes, you can do a beer. Most people do not, and I am not advocating drinking at all, again, like I said, but that would be the only acceptable, forum to where you could be able to do those things. Would be and again, all of this is in the privacy of your own home. This is in between you and God. This should not be something that we are plastering out all over the place. Maybe caffeine is something that could make another brother or sister stumble. Maybe caffeine was something that was very, very addictive for another brother or sister. They nearly died from it. It's sensitive to them or whatever. There's all kinds of situations that could come up. But maybe this is the case. And did you ever think about maybe your coffee or your soda or something like that making your brother stumble? No, because you would say, well, Romans 14 says it's my conscience. We don't have to worry about, So we need to just stay consistent with these arguments, I guess. I don't want to get myself into too much trouble here.
Well, and I think it's so hard, though, but I look at, I can think of off the top of my head, but friends who truly struggle with knowing, I need to stop drinking so much soda, but that's what they consume nonstop. And to try to break that cycle and get off of it, it's awful. It is so difficult. And you feel miserable, and that's why most people give up, because they're sick of feeling like junk, and so they go back to it. But because we're so okay with this addiction, among believers, we excuse it. Oh, it's okay. Just have a cup of coffee. You don't got to beat yourself up over it, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? We get our shirts and all our things that got our Diet Coke on it, or, whatever our thing is that we're all about. And we're so okay with it. And I just, again, like you said, if we're going to be consistent, we need to be consistent, right? And God's word is consistent, so we want to be consistent. So why are we demonizing certain things while living in the idolatry of others?
Exactly. And if y'all heard typing right there, I was just making sure and looking up the verse to pull it up here. I brought up, it's Isaiah 5:11, and Isaiah says, "Woe to those who rise early in the morning, that they may run after strong drink, who tarry late into the evening as wine inflames them." So clearly he's talking about alcohol here in 5:11. However, that first part of the verse just kind of replays it. He says strong drink.
You ever had an espresso?
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. He says strong drink. So what's the difference there? That is a strong drink. And like I said, you're a coffee drinker. There's coffee in my house, people, so don't misquote me.
But look at this difference. But look at this difference, though. And I think all of us, if we're being honest, we can have this. There was a time where, I had to drink soda, and I drink soda all day. Oh my gosh, that mid-afternoon slump, right? And you got to have your soda. I've been a person who drinks way too much wine and doesn't need to be sitting up at night, downing a bottle.
I feel like all of our grandparents in the 90s were just so addicted to soda.
Yeah.
Remember they were like, it's 2:00, gotta have my Pepsi.
Oh my gosh.
Your grandparents and their Pepsi?
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
It wasn't Coke, it was Pepsi.
The big gulp things that they had, just full of Pepsi all day long. But I think it's so interesting to look at it, right? Like me, and again, there's this difference, and this is where I say we just should encourage one another to think about this. I, in the morning, like to have something hot, is really what I've noticed. I like having something hot. So I either can do just tea, which I love, and I actually feel better if I drink an herbal tea than I do coffee. I feel way more alert, way more refreshed, way more ready to go doing that. But I will have yummy coffee in the morning. I've noticed that I usually only drink a cup. I usually make 2, but I only actually drink 1. And that's it, right? So can I get up and get going and enjoy my day and skip coffee? Yeah, absolutely. Can I drink tea instead? Yeah, absolutely. But it's because I had to discipline myself and go, why am I so focused on having coffee in the morning? I completely cut out soda, so I'm not downing myself with caffeine all day long, right? I can drink a sparkling water instead. And then again, if I want to have wine in the evening, I can have a small glass of wine versus, a bottle of wine or something.
Right, because you have specific scripture that says not a slave to much wine.
Yeah. So can you use these things and use them in their proper place? Absolutely you can, right? There are many drugs out there, and drugs can be used in a correct form and right. I will take a natural drug over a pharmaceutical drug any single day ever. But do they have a place that you can use them? Yes. But this idolatry and culture, this worship of caffeine within the church is insanity.
Yeah, we got to be careful with it, and that's just my point.
And then out of the same breath, we demonize so many other things.
So right, and
that's the problem.
And we look stupid, I think, when we do that. So that's that's just my point in this. Again, I'm not saying to not do it. I'm just bringing up the argument. And real quick to close on, the only objections that I got from asking this question from where I asked it was the fact that because the difference between all the other stuff is that they are psychoactive, and it says that. Somebody said that they're like, well, Bible doesn't say that coffee drinkers will go to hell. It says drunkards will go to hell. That's what I got back. So I was like, well, okay. Yes, it does. And I agree. But I don't feel like that answers my question. Really,
don't have a very strong statement there.
Yeah, I'm like,
that
okay.
is a true fact.
And then I had to explain to people in that forum, too. It took me at least 6 messages because it was at a live chat that I asked it. It was like a private live chat with a guy that I really like. But anyway, a teacher that I like. But I asked, and of course everybody gives their just opinion. So it took me about 6 messages to convince people. I'm like, listen, I am not saying not to drink coffee. I am not demonizing it. I'm not saying any of these things. I am simply asking this question. Because I've had the question before of how are these things different? How is it? And it's really not. It's not. But it is because of culture and because of, like you said, legality. Although in our country, things are changing a little bit. But then, like when we look at something and just like alcohol, that's legal everywhere. So, and I understand, again, these things aren't comparable with the psychoactive properties of them, and I'm not trying to compare those. But we cannot deny the facts of what caffeine is and what it does. And it does the same exact thing that you accuse those other things of. You're like, see, you would see that. You're like, see, rapid heartbeat? That's horrible. See, you want to have a heart attack? I say, yeah, well, but you wouldn't say that about drinking coffee or drinking a lot of soda. So those were the few objections that I got. And again, I understand them. So that's where I guess, since you don't really have many objections, Heidi.
I'm sorry, it can't be a topic that I agree so much on.
I guess not. I guess you're no good at this.
Well, it's not that.
Well, and you drink coffee too, so it's really hard
but at
for
the
you
same
to,
time, I think it's just more so. It just I don't get it, and I think we do need to question that because we will praise our idolatry of caffeine and then condemn things that, again, are not being sinful. I'm not saying being drunk, but using other sources that are less than or up to the same amount of, drug activity of going on with caffeine. It's just been normalized, and therefore you don't think about it, and that's a problem because we should think about it.
We should, and we should just adjust accordingly and be careful.
On the day of judgment, do not fear for the atheist so much, the thief, the murderer, If you want to be afraid for someone on the day of judgment, be afraid for those who carried the title pastor. Let me give you an example. I gave this example last night. Let's say that a king had a bride. He loved her. He dressed her in white. She was pure and precious to him, and the people admired her for her virtue, for her merit. And the king has to go on a long journey, and so he tells his steward, he calls his steward in and he says, here are the directions, and you are to care for my bride. You do not deviate from this, not one jot or tittle, and when I come back, you'll be rewarded, or I'll come back and you will be severely punished. Keep this book, these instructions with regard to her. Well, after a few years, this steward realizes that the people are losing their loyalty in the king, and they're no longer concerned about the bride because, well, she's just prudish. She's old-fashioned. So he takes her and takes off her beautiful white garment and replaces it with something really sensual, paints her face like a prostitute, and then marches her up and down the kingdom and uses this new look to attract carnal men back into the kingdom. When that king comes back, there are no words to describe what he will do to that steward. And when Jesus Christ comes back, there are no words to describe what he will do to many of these men who call themselves pastors, who have done to his bride exactly what the steward did in that parable.